today we have a panel. We've never had 4 on our panel, and this is an honor to have you guys. Hope Healthcare, we've got Chad Higbee, Mike MacKrell, Brian Levy, Hope Healthcare, and Manchester Place. Great team. And we are talking about 7 habits of successful home care, home health, and hospice agencies, and residential care homes. So we're talking about, you guys are leaders in the field. We are too, as Acappella. I'm so proud of our team. And what makes you unique? And we want to talk about this today.
Chad, why don't you give us some background on you and
Sure.
how you got in the industry?
Okay. I've been doing what I'm doing in hospice and healthcare for 25 years, and started this company about 5 years ago, and really sort of fell into it by, if you will, providentially. I say that, and it wasn't purposeful, but I felt led or drawn into it, and so I stayed, obviously, because I just fell in love with what we're able to do for folks and how we're able to help them at the end of life. And usually, you've done hospice, Joe, before. And usually when you say, folks ask you, what do you do? And you say hospice, it's usually what? One of two. How do you do that?
That's a calling.
Yeah, it really is. And so, unfortunately, because it's so intense, the average lifespan of a hospice nurse, 3.2 years. The latest stat that I've seen. So it's very intense work because you get close to folks and then they pass. And so it's not necessarily the movement, as you know, is not about, hey, let's just set up a death as a time and space or a time in space. It's about living until you're living no more, right? And it's to make that moment, all those moments count. Really. So.
And Will, your background?
So most of my background is in ministry of some kind. As a parish minister, I'm an Army chaplain. I've been on active duty, have several deployments under my belt, and love serving people. And so at Hope, which I've been at for 4 years, I'm the Director of Support Services, which kind of falls in line with my background, temperament, gifts, abilities.
So with that role, what are your day-to-day duties?
Well, obviously, empowering the team, visiting patients, championing our veterans.
So you're really spending time with your team as well as end of life in the field.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a real honor to be able to share those last few moments, hours, days with someone as they're passing.
To me, it is one of the most sacred callings. But I want to tell you, I laugh with these folks. We tell stories. We listen to their lives. Oh my gosh, they're a hoot. I can't think of another virtuous kind of work to care for people in their most vulnerable time of life.
And so gratifying.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I have to ask. Give me a story.
So her name was Goldie, and she packed grenades in a Texas plant during World War II. And she wasn't known by it, but she asked me, when I die, would you do my funeral? And I said, yes. And she said, and I want you to tell them that I was Grenade Goldie.
Oh,
wow!
And
I love.
She had pictures at her funeral, and I told her, I said, Goldie, you were hot. She goes, I was hot.
That's great. That's great. Have you all ever heard the old adage? It's something to the effect of how someone's lived their dash.
Yes.
Have you ever heard that?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
She
what it
lived
reminds
her
me of.
dash.
She lived her
was
dash.
the most fully alive person, and I guess almost until 24 hours before she transitioned and passed, she was alive, laughing. I was by her side.
Yeah.
That's
we
how
were
I
telling
want to go
jokes.
out.
Right.
So Chad, tell us, your grandfather was very inspirational in getting into home health and caring for people and seniors. Talk about that journey.
Well, he was just inspirational in my life, period. Everything that I did as a kid, whether it was band or Boy Scouts or sports, and I was in a lot of them, he was always there.
Oh.
And so he truly was a grandfather, little play there, but he's just a great guy. And he passed away in 2017, but we called him Peepaw. Peepaw was a World War II Marine stationed in the Philippines before the war began. Got caught up as the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. A couple of days later, they started bombing the Philippines, and he was in this thing called the Bataan Death March, biggest surrender in U.S. military history. Just the things he went through to survive, not only just battle. He's a recipient of the Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Silver Star, and Congressional Gold Medal. So this guy was one of those. He was heroic in his actions because they didn't hand those things out like candy. They never do. And so, and then just to survive 3.5 years in the POW camp talks a lot about resilience. So when he went in, and he was an enlisted guy, 6 foot 205. When he came out, he was 5'10", and weighed 80 pounds. So yeah. So all the guys, if you've ever seen the movie Unbroken, about Louis Zamperini's life, all those guys that, particularly in the Pacific, a lot of in the European theater as well, but they have stories like that. And so you could make a movie out of every one of these guys' stories.
Right.
And so that was always the intrigue when I was a kid growing up. My undergrad's in journalism, so I always liked telling that story. So what we do in hospice, transitioning, taking that inspiration, the military aspects, come from a very large military family. I'm one of 6 grandsons. I'm the only one that didn't serve actively, the only one. And so the penance was to help those veterans at the end of life, right? So not serving my country.
Yeah,
So
you were the one your grandfather confided in.
That's true.
And
Yeah,
shared,
told me.
which is really interesting.
told me, well, I think it's because I was there, I was
Yeah.
present. And so we just had a really good friendship and just a really tight relationship. So he was a lot of the impetus for, the resilience of trying to start a company, not being able to do it, trying to start a company, it took me 12 years to sort of get to the starting line, and so here we are 17 years later, 12 years trying, 5 years actually making it work. It's just a lot of the things that he taught me, whether it was directly or indirectly, probably stuck to the wall, and that's what allowed me. And then, I have folks, I'm fortunate enough to have folks on my team like Mike that, we're really focusing on giving folks those tools because we recognize there's such a lack, in caregiving, those tools that people have to really frame it right in their minds as they're taking care of their loved ones.
Well, and I always share, every senior has a story, and there is so much we can learn from our senior population. And if we just take the step and listen, if we just sit and be patient and listen, we can learn so much. So we're talking about, obviously you've got a military family background. Mike, you too. Brian, I know your leader is so disciplined and amazing. And, with me, I learned from a young age, I was out there. If there was a newspaper drive, I was always the winning.
Right.
I love the challenge, and I learned discipline as an early age. I was cleaning and cooking. I learned how to set a table. While my friends were playing Barbies, I was learning how to make beds with hospital corners. I had a grandmother that was a nurse. So we all got that in some way. But the one thing I learned, my granddad always said, there's honor in all work. And from the CNA that does the turning and bathing to the medical director, we're all so valuable to the team and valuable to the success of the company, And I always say, you're as good as your worst employee. And it's so true.
You're only as strong as your weakest link.
Yeah,
we could go all day long. But
yes.
I believe everybody has a seat on the bus, whether it's the CNA that's caring for the resident or the admin or the marketing director. Everybody has a seat on the bus. Let everybody do what they do best, and the engine will flow.
I love that so much,
Yeah.
and it works. So let's talk about 7 habits of highly successful home care, hospice, group homes, residential homes, home health. What makes you guys successful? And we're talking about these 7 habits. So let's talk about how you implement this to your team and how it's been so effective.
Well, really, first, for us, it's doing the things that, don't always work well. And so you're searching for things to differentiate yourself. Like Brian's organizations, higher end, really nice places, really great people. We're trying to do a lot of the same. How do you stand out in a very crowded marketplace where there's a lot of good people doing a lot of good things out there? And so really, I think the answer to that lies in culture. And it's not an overnight thing that you just wave a magic wand and all of a sudden it just happens. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of making sure you do have the right people in the right seats.
The right people, and you treat them well.
Yeah.
They're not just, this is the staff, but this is the staff, and we care about each one individually. Where if one of them's having a challenge, we don't just discard them, we understand the challenge. Adam was telling the story the other day where one of the caregivers, we have these shirts that we wear, and this is how we were recognized in the marketplace, and her washing machine broke, and she couldn't wash her clothes to get to work. And so we just gave her a loan to get a new washing machine and move on down the road. She'll pay it back. It's no interest. But if we can take care of our staff like that, they're going to take care and work harder because we're all invested in each other. And those are great examples of us being a team.
Yeah.
I think everything, when we look at different opportunities for improvement, I mean, there's 1,000,001 titles out there in books, right? And so that's how Mike and I really sort of started kicking the ideas back and forth. We read several books, part of a book club at work, just something to encourage one another in. And we just finished one called Measure What Matters. And so it really ties into setting, almost what you might call micro habits, little things, little successes that you can really accomplish and feel good about accomplishing, but turn that into something a little bit bigger, and bigger chunks, if you will. And it's something that's replicatable, so anybody can do it. We both have just went through a process of losing a lot of weight. I've lost about 40. Mike's lost what?
Same.
About 40 pounds.
Wow, good
And
for
so
you guys.
that didn't happen overnight. It didn't come by beating ourselves up in the gym because we're too old for that stuff, right? And so,
Discipline.
but it's
Yeah.
it's what goes in, right? First, I mean that's where it starts. And so
Yeah.
we just started looking at that, encouraging one another. And within I started in May, so in about 6 months, I've lost the 40 pounds. Got 10 more pounds to go. But that sort of catapults into other areas and makes you think as a leader about other aspects of what you're doing and what you're touching. And how can I replicate this in other people's life without beating them up? Just encourage them to lead by example.
I saw Chad, and his life transformation in terms of the weight loss motivated me to finally practice the first habit of Stephen Covey's habits, which is be proactive. I've been making enough excuses for a long time about my health, and even as an Army chaplain, I was kind of given a pass by saying, well, he's just an old guy. And I said, no, I'm going to continue to compete along the 20 and 30-somethings to be able to have a valid voice and seat at the table. And, right, so some success in that area now has spilled over to how that one habit of being proactive, right, of making the choice, of saying no, pushing away the chips from the table,
Right.
and say no, instead I'm going to have something else that isn't going to do the damage and that I've continued to do. So.
You touched on something a second ago about culture, and I'd like to know a little bit more about, all of our companies, we're firm believers in culture. Tell me a little bit about your culture and how that translates through your employees.
Previous life was I knew Sam Walton personally, and so I actually worked for Walmart. When Sam was still alive in the early '90s, and very different culture as he started the company back in the 50s, 60s, I guess, early 60s, and as he created it was just about not expecting. You were talking about the aide. Say I'm in this scenario, I'm the medical director, that I wouldn't ask the aide to do something that I wasn't willing to do and show how to do myself. So a lot of it is that, being willing to, the other day, to the nurses go, Mike, Chad, we're talking, hey, can, we live in Collin County, can you take these supplies by this patient in Rowlett? I'm like, hey, yeah, sure, that's on the way home, not a problem. And so it's just, oh, thank you. It's just little things like that.
Right.
It's no big deal. Well, it was to them because they didn't want to drive 20 minutes out of the way and get home at 7 at night in this Dallas traffic, right?
That's
But also, I want
huge,
to point out
though.
the beauty of that whole story is that employee felt comfortable asking you to do that.
Yeah.
And so you have an open door policy where
Yeah,
your
right.
employees feel comfortable asking the boss to do them a favor. I think that's real important.
And it just shows the teamwork.
Yeah.
So in home care, hospice, home health, tell me proactive. What do you mean by that? If you could speak to someone that says, you know what, I want to turn a new leaf. I want to become really successful. I want to be one of the good guys. What is a first start, would you say, as far as being proactive?
Well, I think Covey begins his book by talking about a vision for what you want to move after. What do you want to achieve? What do you want to go after? And he said, if you're going to take a flight, you need certain things. You need a map, a compass, you need a flight plan. But just having those without doing anything that's great, but in order to move forward, you've got to be proactive. Most of us are reactive, right? Reactive in our relationships. But this is the idea of what is it that I really want to achieve? What do I want to go after? Who do we want our company to become? Who do we want our people to be? And then to help them develop their own lives, not just in the skill sets that they have, but to give them values and training along how can they be successful at home after work.
So what's number 2?
Well, you're the expert, so help me
Begin
out
with
with
the end
that.
in mind.
No,
and
that's
it ties into that.
yeah,
Begin with
it
the end
is.
in mind.
It's
Okay.
really, and you were talking about vision earlier. Adam's vision, he's real visionary. You were talking about, real estate, all different types of things, and I just looked at him like, I would have never thought of that. So I think,
If you have
somewhat
a-
strategic and visionary, but things like
Strategic.
that.
If you have a plan,
Yeah.
if you have a goal, then you can put together a plan to reach that goal. You have to have a plan to get there.
A lot of people have these great ideas, but they don't know how
Know
to implement.
Yeah.
And that's so true. I can't wait to get the book. I'm going to get the audio book. So keep going.
So the third habit is put first things first. So he talks about how there is conventional wisdom, an old paradigm which might say, I spend time on what's urgent. We all know that. We have pressing
Emails.
calls, emails, but this habit says, I spend time on what's most important. The significant relationships, the people in our company.
So what's that mean? I mean, it means that you don't let your emails necessarily stack up, because there's going to be something important in there, right? But having a little bit of a habit, and what I'm trying to get into, practically speaking, is I'll check that, at certain times of the day, not just be drawn to that all the time, because that's easy to do, because you get so many, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, phone, laptop, anything. And it's like, I'll check it in the morning first thing. When I go in early. I'm usually the first one there, last one to leave. So I'm checking it when I get there around noon, lunchtime, if I'm eating at my desk, and then when I leave. I try to leave that in-between space for people
Right.
and for business. That's hard.
I'm
That's
sitting
hard.
over here chuckling. In my past lifetime, right out of college, I was in advertising and marketing, and I had a sign on my desk, and it said, "What makes you think your emergency has to be my emergency?" And then I got into elder care,
Yeah.
and I realized everybody's
Everybody's
emergency is my emergency. So
Yeah,
you,
it's a
somewhat, you're
crisis.
everything's a crisis.
And that's how you have to approach home care, hospice, is it's an emergency. And it may not be an emergency to us. What we say at Acappella, we're like an ER. We're always open.
Yeah.
We always have somebody answer the phone. We don't have an answering service because we feel that personal touch is so important. But you do have to be ahead. You've got to practice what you preach. If you're offering something, follow through. And if you make a mistake, follow through. I messed up. I'm really sorry.
And one of the most effective or important habits of a highly successful person or company, communication. And that means answering your phone, being responsive.
One of the things, being a former hospice nurse, right? The caseloads and how many people you take care of, and just the busyness that can create of my emergencies always now. Because really, in our industry, what I tell our staff is they really don't need us until they need us. What does that mean? Well, not everybody is sitting at the dinner table talking about death and dying, right? Every night? Probably not. But when they need that service,
They need it right
then.
away.
And they need
Yeah.
an answer.
Yeah.
And they don't want to hear. I know when my mother was on hospice, I share this story. We called on a Saturday, and this nurse showed up 4 hours later, and she walked in. My mother's shaking. It was in a group home, and she goes, "So somebody called for me?" Come on here.
Yeah.
You got a report, and just instead of, she could have said,
First
"How are you
hallmark of
doing?
what we do is compassion,
Yeah,
right?
what's going on?"
Yeah.
And I understand you need a nurse and you've got some anxiety. How can I help? It's so simple to put yourself in their shoes or try to, put yourself where they are.
Be empathetic.
Yeah.
So one of those things is casting that vision and then really actually taking steps to get to that vision. So everybody that's around you, that's with you on the team, hey, we're actually going to where this guy or this lady says we're going, and that's exciting. That creates energy. And so habit number 4, we talked a little bit about.
Is think win-win.
So it's not about I've got to step on you or him. Why can't we all win, so to speak? Why can't the patient win? Why can't the families win? Why can't the doc win who's sending the referral? Why can't the hospital systems win?
Right.
So it's a lot of work.
Mutual beneficial
Yeah.
relationships. You never want to feel like you're getting the short end of the stick.
Or the blame game.
Or the-
They didn't, sometimes I'll hear, that case manager didn't give us, from a hospital discharge.
Right.
Well, but maybe she had 40 people discharging all within an hour, was
Yeah.
waiting on orders, didn't have the proper information. So, give them the benefit of the doubt.
Or the classic example just happened to us recently, set time on transport. another set time on transport. Now the nurses waiting, the families waiting, the patients waiting, the discharge planners. And it's not about beating up the transport folks because they have emergencies too.
Right.
But it's just, things happen. So what we're trying to do through this process is build in margin, resilience. So when the stuff comes at us, we don't just fall apart, right?
But it's not what happens, it's how you handled it that
Yeah.
matters.
Yep.
And that's really, really key. Just do the right thing.
Yeah, and a lot of times, and I try to tell families this too, mom's got to come home. She's got to be home by 6. Well, they still don't have doctor's orders yet. Or sometimes then she'll call the daughter frazzled. She's not going home till tomorrow. So a lot of times we, as the home health, the hospice, the home care, we don't get all the information, or we're just as in the dark
Right.
as the family is. And so there's so many moving parts, in that discharge process, so.
I think the resilience piece, that's one thing that we've noticed, and specifically because of Mike's skill sets and what he does for the U.S. Army. I think you just share a little bit of what you do for the Army so they can see the flow of, it's a business decision too. Why not just an emotional decision and my attachment to my grandfather and his story, but 1 in every 4 deaths right now is veteran related in the country. So it's a business decision. That's 25% of all the people who come to the end of their life. And so it's
1 of every 4 is a veteran?
Mhm.
Yes.
Wow.
Veteran
What a statistic. And you
Yeah.
can really relate to each person you're touching. I mean, you have a
Well, right. I think there's just the idea that, you've served, you know what it's like to wear a uniform. I think that helps. I think everybody can connect with a veteran.
Yeah.
It's just we can share similar kind of experiences. Though I wasn't in Iwo Jima or other parts of the world, I have been to Afghanistan and Iraq and Kuwait and those places. So they at least connect. We connect better, right? We have a tighter
If you
connection.
find a
because of that.
commonality like that with someone, especially in a time of crisis, it just takes the edge off, and then you become. There's more of a bond.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
That's
much
great.
so.
And it's, the strength to strength. Taking certain skill sets that certain people have. I mean, I laugh because I'd like you to share the story of just when you came to us, you were answering an ad for a part-time chaplain role. And so, take it away.
So I was working at Parkland Hospital. I was in the clinic doing clinical work to gain my seat at the clinical table as a chaplain, and I responded to the ad. And
Yeah, we had a great conversation, and he's telling me all the stuff that he's done and he wants to do. And I asked him, and as I often ask, and you probably do this too when you're interviewing folks, hey, what if you could describe your perfect role or job, what would that be? And just give people sort of license to be creative, right? And so I'd work with veterans, and I do this in the Army, and I just, being an owner, you have the privilege sometimes, or a leader, you have the privilege sometimes of saying, okay, let's make that so. So I knew where I wanted to go in terms of starting with the end in mind, of have this program, have some type of extra structure that works around and with veterans, but I didn't really know exactly the steps I needed to take. But I knew that what was sitting right in front of me was one of the pieces of the puzzle. Right?
And the habit worked because you believe in the person. You
Yeah.
weren't looking for that position.
Yeah.
You weren't trying to plug somebody into a certain place. You believed in the person, and I think that's a really important component of a
It
successful
is,
company.
and finding talent. I know people have said to me over the years with Acappella, you were really good at finding good talent,
Yeah.
and it's finding that heart, but you can't be too emotional because, you've still got a work to do and a job to do, but it's just finding that person that has those unique qualities, and, everybody in this room has those qualities, and anyway, that's great.
I think we start with values too, because one of the other things we ask, what are your personal values? And so if those even come close to what our corporate values are, we know that we're already a couple steps ahead, right? And then that really opens up and segues into a really nice conversation about what we want to do, where we want to go as an organization, how we want to affect cultural change in DFW and our state and our nation, and then how they can be a part of that, something bigger than really who they are.
And I've met a lot of your staff, and I know some of your staff as well. When people enjoy what they're doing personally and it's gratifying, they're going to do a great job because they don't look at it as a job. It's in their heart, and they're doing it because
it's a
they believe
ministry.
in it.
It's
and
a
that's
mission.
really an important component of a successful company as well, is enjoying what you do. I think we all enjoy what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. 25 years.
25 years later, right?
So how have these steps, and I know there are a couple more, how has this helped build your team?
I think we're still in the process, because we're really, in all honesty, we're really launching that, because you can't, if you want to go to a different place, you can't always do what you've always done to get what you've always got, right? So we just know that we wanted to tweak it some. Very kind to say, you know, the good things you did at the top of the podcast, but we want to go in an even better direction. So how do we do that? We have to have some of these tools. We have to replicate that. We have to share that.
We wanted
with
a
our
common
team.
language
Yeah.
that all of us could speak and point back to, right? We wanted all of our aides, nurses, social workers, chaplains, every staff member to be able to feel empowered and then aligned together, that we were working synergistically. I think those things are, right, how we show we love and care for them, by saying these skills are translatable far beyond your day-to-day work.
Yeah.
They're going to impact your family and your children and
Your marriage, yeah.
And so I got this training 10 years ago by John Covey, Stephen Covey's brother in the Army, and I've been teaching this to soldiers. And so I do weekend retreats for marriages. That's kind of like my job for the Army right now, is I'm a weekend marriage retreat leader. I do resilience training, and this is one of the curriculums that we teach, and it's 7 Habits of Highly Successful Families.
Now, we were talking about military weapons.
Yes.
There's no weapons on these retreats,
No
right?
weapons,
I
civilian
have a
clothes,
hunch.
no
Yeah,
rank.
no, right. No grenades.
No grenades. But what I saw with families of soldiers and families is just by the exposure and awareness that there is actually tools that can help you move your family along. We don't teach them what their values are. We just show them the plan of how they can implement those by being proactive, beginning with the end in mind, putting first things first, thinking win-win, a third alternative, not compromise, but what can all of us as a family collaborate on that will bring out something newer and better? And so, right, so you teach these families, and I'm just telling you that their mouths open, they grow closer, they get farther along in terms of the unity and cohesiveness. Stephen Covey even says, what's the end result of the 7 Habits for Families? It's a beautiful family culture, a place that people and the children and the family wants to be at. The vibe, right? That
So share an
atmosphere.
example of a family that you've worked with on a retreat like that from A to Z.
I can think last month we had a family that actually came, a husband and wife and their 2 children, and they were actually contemplating divorce. And they said, this is like the last step. So we talked about how to start where you are. You can't go back and catastrophize over what didn't happen.
Right.
Let's just start where you are. So I think that right there is that they said was just a drop of hope that they clung on to say, okay, we're going to begin where we are. And then using the entire family as basically like the learning lab to say, okay, let's build from where we are with these principles. So how we can take that forward. So in their time together, they had conversations about they wanted to spend not just quality time together, but quantity time. Turn off the TV, turn off the cell phone. Let's just go somewhere where there's not all of these modern conventions and distractions. And so they made a plan, and they wrote down a family mission statement. From this day on, here's our mission statement. We're going to be about loving, laughing, and living.
I love it.
You know what?
You're
Can
like
I say
Dr. Phil.
something too?
That's great.
With text messages, emails, sometimes you're in a hurry, and I know in business, and this is one thing with Acappella, a lot of times you can misread a text, misread an email, and it's so important. I know it's convenient, but a lot of times it's troublesome too. And so be really careful on how you communicate. And that's what I love, meeting with the team and really empowering the team with these habits. Instead of sending an email, hey, here's an in-service you can do on your own time. No, get together and unite everyone.
As we come back and things start opening up after this COVID mess, I think that hunger for that face-to-face, the touch, the feel, this, so people are hungry for that, and it's sort of a ripe time. I don't know if that's a good use of wordage there, but it's sort of a ripe time for us to introduce and press forward with this initiative, because what used to be is not going to be the same thing as it's been. COVID's taught us a lot of different things. The use of technology with telemedicine, things like that, which we really didn't practice a lot before. But really that connectivity that we know that elders that are sequestered in a facility or something that can't have visits from the loved ones, it's been really damaging for all, not just the seniors, but for the families and the folks that have to watch that.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
yes.
bringing this, and some of this is just really things that Grandma taught us, right? It's common sense, subtle reminders, but it's an opportunity for us to stop and to really rethink and rehash, or I guess, reframe. That's really what I was looking for.
Calibrate. Yeah.
Yeah, and as we go for it, because how do you respond to the text? Hey, maybe I'll just pick up the phone. Hey, you said this, and I just want to make sure I'm reading it right.
Sure, yes,
Yeah.
and that's
So-
so important to communicate. So let's finish quickly the other habits that.
So there's one, Joe, that you live, and that's seeking first to understand before being understood. It's all about listening. It's all about listening not to reply, not to rebut, but listening to actually understand. And that's what our business is,
Right.
right?
Yeah. That's great.
There's another one, synergize, and that's the idea of collaborating. And that family, you were asking me, that family sat down and they wrote, well, what do we not want in our family? And one of the children in that family, because I was watching their table, said, no. If we're going to start where we are, let's write what we want. And she said she didn't want, as a 13-year-old, she didn't want all the things you would think a 13-year-old want. She goes, I want more time with you.
Aw.
Yeah.
So when they were able to seek to understand, they got to the heart of the matter. But it could have been, listening to reply, listening to rebut, coming up with excuses. But this was...
But then they listen to it and own that.
They did.
And then they can project
And I watched it, and I went, this is just the beauty of creating that environment where they can have conversation apart from all the other distractions.
Yeah.
And then they focus on these timeless principles, which are kind of like laws, like the law of gravity. It's just there, right? And so we're just tapping into things that are already there, like what's important to you with your boys? One-on-one time.
Right.
They look in your eye. Thank you, Dad. And you thank them, and boy, that just warms your heart.
Time
And you're
we
like,
will
oh my
never
gosh,
get- yeah.
memories.
Yeah. Making memories.
Making memories.
So I know we're going to need to wrap up. This has gone so beautifully, and it's been great. Let's talk about, I know you're successful, just really quick. You had some statistics on failures in business, and I'd love for you to share those just to give encouragement to those that are doing a great job and how you can
Yeah.
keep pressing forward.
Well, I think, I wrote a couple things down and notes there. It was interesting. Mike and I were talking prior to coming over for the podcast, and we were just curious on, what makes a business successful? Well, is it length of time in business? So we just, good old Google, 2 years or less, business failures, 20%. So every business that starts out in 2 years, 20% of those folks will be gone. 5 years, 45%. 10 years, we're starting to age a little bit now, 65%, okay?
Wow.
And so the businesses that live to be 15 years old in their life cycle or greater is only 25% of the business in the United States.
Wow.
So what's the differentiator? Why the 2 years and the 15 years? I think it's being very purposeful, taking the extra time, because we know we're all so busy. It's taking the extra time to sit down, to write that plan, to be purposeful, to have one-on-one conversations with your leaders, to pour yourself into them. You talked about it's not just the leaders, but how do I best replicate? How can I accomplish this? Because I can't, as a leader of 100 people and a staff of 100, I can't spend an hour with each person every day. It's just impossible. But I can pour into my leaders, and those leaders can pour into their leaders, and so on and so on. It's sort of like the old shampoo commercial, Telling my age again. But anyway, so I think those are one of the things that, or some of the things that really help differentiate things, and the way that Mike was able to really verbalize that. I think it explains a good story on why some are still around and why some aren't.
Right.
So, Mike, if you could say one thing, what is it that makes Chad such an amazing leader? What would you say?
Strategy. He's always thinking future. And the thing I love about Chad is not just my boss, but a friend, is that I told him, I said, you created this company and you have given us jobs. And we don't, in many regards, as your leaders, want to let you down. We want to do the best we can. But if we continue to do those things that make families successful, caring for people, then I think we'll have a longer tenure than a shorter tenure.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Great.
you for doing what you're doing. How can, if somebody wants more information on Hope Healthcare, can they reach you guys?
Of various sundry ways. The easiest way, if you're local, 972-366-3050 is our direct dial phone number. We're on the web at Hope Healthcare. I can't even say it. HopeHealthCareUS.com. That's the best way. And there's Facebook, Instagram, things like that. So we're out there.
And Brian,
So-
I know we want to
and
bring
Google.
up, yes, thank you. And Manchester Plays, Cambridge Caregivers, how can we reach you?
My telephone number is 214-649-9922, CambridgeCaregivers.com, ManchesterLiving.com. And Joe, how can we reach you?
We are 214-866-0085. And I just want to say there is so much business in the senior industry. And a lot of people step in and think, I think I'm going to open a home care agency. And it's a lot harder.
Yeah.
It is so much work. Group home, hospice. But what I love about our industry is we all work together. You all have had patients together. We've shared
had, yeah.
patients. And it's really about if I'm not a good fit, I can hand you over to somebody that I know you'll be in great hands. We had a call today from a neighbor. Joe, I need a hospice. Who do you recommend? And so we work together. It's people need to forget about the competition so much as providing that care and providing information.
Serve the community
serve
and everything
well.
falls into place.
Yeah. So speaking of serving, we have a pajama event coming up on. We've got a virtual fun run coming up in November. We've also got a Pinot and pajamas in North Dallas at Manchester Place. So we've got a lot of things coming up, and we want to support our low-income seniors. If you're interested in helping with Pajamas for Seniors, please give us a shout. info@pajamasforseniors.org. It's going to be a community-wide event, and we are just so excited to serve others. So,
November 12th.
November 12th. And we've got our Pajamas on the Run November 21st. We also have a Jingle and Mingle event, and that is going to be December 11th. So if you want to serve and help the senior community, don't know what to do, give us a shout and we will direct you.
Get
So,
involved.
Get involved.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much.
you,
It's been
Joe.
awesome. Y'all been great.
Thank you.